Sports Professor Rick Horrow. Thanks for joining me for Beyond the Scoreboard, an inside look at the trillion-dollar business of sports, sports news, sports marketing, sports deal-making, all the things involved beyond the X's and O's and outside the field, and there are many today. We'll get right to it. Sonny Vaccaro, one of the guys in ground zero of the whole controversy of paying coaches and the NCAA investigation by the FBI and the like, gave us 20 excellent exclusive minutes, and we'll talk about that very quickly. But let's get to our big items first, by the way. And with the playoffs happening in hockey, beginning of the season in the NBA, and playoffs in racing, in golf over, football a quarter of the way through. Obviously, there's a big deal now in baseball. This is the time you focus on many of these issues. College sports rearing its head, pay for play, all of those economics. We'll get to Sonny in a minute, but if you want to see our 15 list plus our top 5 tech issues and our top 5 social issues now called the Power 5, join us on CSN Mid-Atlantic. Take a look at the site. Also, take a look at us as far as Stitcher, Google Play, Audio Boom. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcast. We have a whole bunch of stuff going on. But let's take a look at some of the big issues first, and then we'll get to Sonny Vaccaro. NBA capturing the headlines many different ways. Player protests are something that we're going to take a look at. Cavaliers and the Celtics kick off the season with the Warriors and the Rockets. Steph Curry, among the first athletes to openly speak out against President Trump and now walking a socio-political path, by the way. He's the face of Under Armour and Infinity. He's certainly aware of the balance he needs to strike between voicing his personal opinion on controversial issues and representing his sponsors. He says, I'm well aware of that. And in this world, there's no way you can please everybody. There's no reason you should want to. I'm very comfortable understanding that I'm not letting that affect my view or stance. And in NBA, my take would be already having a national anthem policy in place. So while it's unlikely we'll see any NBA players kneeling courtside during the anthem, expect player statements to be made via many other social platforms. But how about another pocketbook explanation? A lot of teams are not staying at Trump hotels this year. 11 of the 12 teams that stayed at Trump Soho since it opened in 2010 has since made new arrangements when they play in New York. Raptors, Rockets, Kings, Wizards all decided to stop giving Trump hotels their business. Another NBA team quit staying at the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Chicago. At least 3 NHL teams and 1 baseball club stopped frequenting Trump hotels in the same time frame. Some teams cite travel logistics, not politics, as their motivation to go elsewhere, although a lot of people continually are not so subtle. Steve Kerr, and I quote, he continually offends people, so people don't want to stay at his hotel. And luxury properties around NBA cities, fairly easy decision for team travel coordinators to look elsewhere, and that's exactly what they're doing and have been doing. Take a look at NBA issues elsewhere, like NBA League Pass can now be viewed in a new and exciting way through NextFR. Fans and consumers can watch every NBA game through virtual reality headsets that put you directly in the same arena. The CEO, David Cole, has this to say about the new VR advancement. Quote, following a groundbreaking first season of NBA games in VR, will now introduce new product features, real-time graphics, floating like holograms within the field of play, deliver sharper images, introduce more VR devices to fans, and on and on. And the take is obvious. With so many NBA games available to watch, it makes sense for many fans to take the investment and experience to a whole new level. Look at a few specific teams. The Rockets. Owner Tillman Fertitta, remember he bought them from Les Alexander, and he spent a couple billion doing it. Now he wants his team to be a contender, and quickly. His Toyota Center arrival couldn't have come quick enough for some people, but he will work out of his headquarters at the Post Oak in downtown Houston. I don't want to win 3 in a row and not win for the next 20 or 25 years. I want to be competitive every year we're going to make good decisions, we're going to do whatever it takes to win. Attitude is great, but cementing a crack front office staff will contribute to more championships, he says. And oh, by the way, he also wants a hockey team in Houston. Don't underestimate the guy. He lost out to Les Alexander 25 years ago. Now he spends $2 billion buying them, and the sky's the limit. Let's go a little west to Los Angeles. Clipper fans have a new way of making sure that the ticket they're buying is exactly what they want. Fan Sight by AXS. Fans can now see a 360-degree view of what their seat will look like in the arena. Gillian Zucker, the president of business operations for the Clips, they're focused on enhancing our fan experience and purchasing a ticket, one of the first touch points a fan will have with our brand. And they say the ticket folks will provide the most accurate view from a seat or a Clippers game, with a promise to bring to life the NBA in such a way that gives us a chance to have really good dynamics as to what people are buying. And if ticket distributors such as StubHub and Ticketmaster are able to adopt the same type of technology as they're working toward and are doing, consumers will have a much more personalized experience buying their ticket. So look at the NBA in the overall context of generating excitement, taking a look at the protests as a means to a social end, but you can't wait for the NBA season, some would say. Well, not so fast. How about Major League Baseball? Well, guess what? Tough time for Washington fans, but they are in the playoffs, and the Yankee shortstop Didi Gregorius looking at a postseason push to grow his endorsement profile. According to Forbes, Gregorius' strong, infectious personality, coupled with his on-field performance, has helped him land new deals with Wix.com, Delta, Banana Republic, Stance, and Planters. He already has sponsorship deals in place with Nike, Mizuno, and Louisville Slugger, but those paled in comparison to what he's doing now. His off-field income expected to be well north of $500,000. He's a catch for potential endorsers. He speaks 4 languages, has a growing social media presence in which he celebrates Yankees wins on Twitter, with emojis representing different Yankee stars. And the take is obvious here as well. Sponsors also leverage the geographic advantage that he plays in New York, and accordingly, Gregorius has made multiple live appearances around the city on behalf of his endorsers. Well, you probably don't want to talk about it, but the Dodgers and Astros now leading their conferences 2-0 in respective series, and they're obviously going to be significant through the end of the week and more, no matter what the results are. The Cubs and Yankees are there, too. Broadcast partners salivating the idea of, regardless of the outcomes, 3 of the 4 largest markets will have representation, competing storylines, 2018 World Series as well. The ALCS, watching the Yankees, a team with one of the biggest fan bases, and the resurgent Astros, team playing in their place for modern baseball history, but also representing a community still reeling from Hurricane Harvey, L.A. The NLCS putting the world champion Chicago Cubs against the ever-popular Dodgers, who last won the series, by the way, 29 years ago. They sold more than 3.7 million tickets, and that means the club has led the majors in attendance each of the last 5 full seasons under Guggenheim Baseball. Dodgers also made the playoffs all 5 seasons, a significant milestone. But I know people in Washington don't want to focus on this, but rate of play, rate of play, rate of play. That 9-8 win that Washington fans want to forget was the longest 9-inning game in playoff history. The increase in game time attributed to a few major reasons: longer commercial time, more pitching changes, more mound visits, max effort pitches, and longer between pitches. But the MLB been trying to address the rate of play throughout the regular season, and come playoff time, the play tends to be more meticulous and slow down. And my take has been this for a long time. Baseball, Rob Manfred, focuses on this issue, but more needs to be done, especially if the league hopes to continue to attract the next generation of fans, not exactly known for their long attention span. Let's go to college sports, then we'll get to the interview, which may define the nature of college sports in the near future. First of all, rivalries continue to exist and be more intensified. Kansas and Missouri making plans to scrimmage each other in a renewed border war. As far as basketball is concerned, the two schools have not played against each other since 2012, when Missouri left for the SEC. So, division opponents, if a game is to take place, the universities would need the permission of the NCAA, be it in the form of a waiver or something similar. Missouri hosted an exhibition game in 2011 to raise money for the relief efforts following the Joplin tornado. And while the proposed Sprint Center, while the Sprint Center won't have an immediate as beneficiary, it would be great to raise tens of thousands of dollars in relief funds as well. And clearly, that is a good example. There are schools that are looking to be diamonds in the rough and break out of where they are today and where they're going. And the University of Central Florida is a pretty good example. They have a big deal as far as their football stadium, though it's in need of a patch-up, $14 million. Spectrum Stadium was found to have rust and corrosion around it, immediate life safety concerns. It's become so rusted, the overhaul could cost about another quarter of the stadium's $54 million price tag. The extent of the repair job will depend on how much the school spends on it and whether the stadium life extends another 10 or 20 years. All too frequently, though, when schools and communities budget for sports facilities construction projects, they underestimate the funds needed for adequate maintenance over time. This is only the most recent example of the oversight. The bottom line is colleges need money, and it is big money. Leads us to our kind of focus of the show today. Tony Bland, University of Southern California. Emmanuel Book Richardson, University of Arizona. Lamont Evans, Oklahoma State University. Chuck Person, Auburn University. All indicted. Louisville, Arizona. Miami, Southern Cal. Oklahoma State, South Carolina. Auburn, all being investigated in a way that could shake the business of college basketball to its core. Sonny Vaccaro pioneered the modern college sports apparel business by paying coaches to use the Nike brand. He then worked for Reebok. He then worked for Adidas. He has a legacy that is basically the pioneer of this. All legal at the time, and clearly best known for his tenure with all of those sneaker companies, but he also founded the ABCD All-America Camp and Elite Showcase for high school basketball standouts. And who were they? From 1984 to 2007, Kobe Bryant, Dwight Howard, LeBron James, Alonzo Mourning, Kevin Garnett, Calvin Murphy, Shaq, Tracy McGrady, Patrick Ewing, and on and on and on. Vaccaro helped recruit Ed O'Bannon for that famous bit of litigation that we all now know gives athletes credit for their likenesses. But more important than that, Sonny Vaccaro is a pioneer who has transcended a lot of issues in his sport and is free, therefore, to clearly speak his mind. And boy, speak his mind he does.
Rick Horrow, Beyond the Boardroom, inside the baseball, basketball, football world of a trillion-dollar sports business, and somebody that's helped shape it and has always been front and center, Sonny Vaccaro. He's the best-known guy for his tenure with Nike, signed Michael Jordan. Then he left Nike for Adidas, then Reebok, founded the ABCD All-America Camp, showcasing high school basketball standouts. You may have heard of some of them: Kobe Bryant, Dwight Howard, LeBron James, just to name three. You don't need to name others because obviously those three are the start of a long line of relationships that Sonny has. 30 for 30 documentary about Sonny Vaccaro entitled Soul Man. It aired a couple of years ago. But there are a whole bunch of issues in college sports that involve Sonny directly or indirectly. It's an honor to have him. How are you?
I'm fine, young fella. Looking forward to doing this interview.
Good. Awesome. I'm glad Sonny addresses me as a young fellow. That's very important to my psyche as we go forward. So let's talk about the modern college basketball sports apparel business, obviously paying coaches to use the Nike brand, Reebok, Adidas, etc. Tell us kind of the nature of how you got involved in that and realizing that that was a very key, legitimate way to take a foothold in the sports business. How did that get started? And let's give us some perspective on that.
Completely by accident. It's just, as most of my life is sort of unfolded over these last, 78 years of it. I only can address how I lived it. So asking the question how, the marketing started on college sports, it definitely started with Nike in 1977 when I came up with a thought that I gave to Phil Knight and Rob Strausser, who was first in command after Phil at Nike at that time. They had really nothing to do other than in a running shoe situation. It was a very young company, $25 million in revenue, I think, at that time, where I suggested to them, because they wanted to get involved in basketball, since I had been very close and started the first high school all-star game when I was 24 years old in Pittsburgh called the Dapper Dan Romball Classic with my childhood buddy, Pat DeCesar. I grew into an era in life of basketball camps, all-star games, and then eventually got me to this, to go how it started. Some kids at a camp of mine said, Mr. Vaccaro, what if they did different things with tennis shoes? At that time, they called them tennis shoes. And I said, what do you mean, whatever the young man's name was? He said, well, we wear tennis shoes everywhere, to church and school and, play basketball in and that. And they usually look like the poor man's thing. Why don't they make tennis shoes? And I'm embellishing the words now. But the thought was, the young person gave me a suggestion that tennis shoes could be more appropriate in other things too. And then 50 years later, we find out that there's dollies on them also. You wear them with tuxedos. But at that time in 1977, no one thought that. I went to Nike, introduced about 14, 15 different pair of shoes that an Italian friend of mine named Bob Di Rinaldo from my little hometown in Pennsylvania. Some prototypes. I met the Nike people. They took my shoes. I never saw them again 9,000 years later. But we went to lunch, and then they started talking to me about basketball. And then I somehow in a conversation said, well, if you really want to get into basketball, why don't you just pay the college coaches, give all your shoes away to these teams free, and you'll get publicity you've never gotten before. And that's the innocence it was. It was a mind thought by me, an idea. That it was something that we wouldn't have talked about. I wouldn't have gone to lunch at the Chinese restaurant with them if the kid wouldn't have mentioned. This never would have happened in the way it happened. I guess someday someone would have started it. But mine was simply a logical extension of my life. Kid made an idea. I said to them, they asked me a question, pay the coaches. And basically what we did from 1977 to 1988, when the first all-school deal in the history of sports was signed by a shoe company and a school, was the University of Miami, no less, with Sam Jankovic, who was the athletic director of the University of Miami, and a young man who graduated, and at the time he called me, he was a major labor union lawyer in Washington, D.C., called me and said, Mr. Vaccaro, Mr. Jankovic would like to do an all-school deal. So going from me paying coaches directly and them wearing the shoes and the kids wearing them and selling product in those intervening 7, 12, 13 years, other than also signing Michael Jordan in the intermediate, but the college coaches were first. The University of Miami is the one that changed the world with an all-school day. That's how it happened. Most of the things in my life, just like Jordan for a minute. I never knew Michael Jordan. They asked me a question. Who would I sign? How much money do we have? I said, give it to the kid. They signed Jordan. So staying on that, but going back to the industry that we're now talking about, it's a multi-zillion-dollar industry. Nike's one of the most successful corporations in the world, and it all started a long time ago with paying the coaches.
Well, the interesting piece about this is that most ideas that are good start fairly innocently and evolve from there. And can't think of a better visionary opportunity than you and Sam getting together and doing all of this. The bottom line, too, is years ago, you had some perspective, and now you have even more. Looking back on it, what would you have changed about how the industry has evolved as far as amateur kids getting paid? And I know it took O'Bannon's litigation to even begin that, so kudos to you. But how would you have raised? You wave a magic wand, you got it at your disposal, you change the industry. How do you do it?
If you're talking about changing now, Rick, how you do it is what happened. A major mistake was made by major players who got exposed by the federal government in a crime as opposed to illegal recruiting. The only way we would have had this conversation, the only thing that would have been meaningful for the next years, because we have found out in the past the most inept organization, and I say this with no bias towards the human beings, but bias towards the facility here, and the facility is the NCAA. These people govern an operation that brings in billions of dollars by their mausoleum in Indianapolis. And I'm not making fun of them to ridicule them again. I'm just telling the truth. I don't know. I can understand why the pyramids, why castles were built. I don't understand why that thing in Indianapolis was built, because they have no reason other than to protect the money that athletes generate for them to be involved at the levels they're involved. So what I've seen and what happened just 2 weeks ago or a week ago, I guess, the evolution of the next step in amateur, and that's the funny word. There is no amateur in college athletics, but they've been putting this idea in front of human beings for about 100 years, they being the NCAA. The only thing I can say about it is one of the nicest things about our society, our sports, one of the best things, even above professional sports, is people ideologically rooting for either their school that they went to, the high school they went to, a friend that went to it, or the old Subway alumni trick where you just evolve into being a Notre Dame fan or a Pitt Panther fan if you grew up or if you were somehow connected by the umbilical cord. There's nothing better than college athletics, except there's been nothing dirtier than college athletics for a long period of time. But we failed to accept it because we love it so much. But we've come to a point in 2017 where the love has now gone into breaking laws, not rules. And I think a lot's going to happen. And I hope a lot. I'm very sad that persons are getting indicted and maybe convicted. I didn't cause that. The system, by not allowing athletes to be upfront about it and not doing more for the athletes who are generating the money, and that's going to be maybe later in this particular program, but later in life. But O'Bannon started it. So did King Culture started to a point. So did other lawsuits. Jeffrey Kessler's got a couple going. But the only way anyone listens in this country is if you violate a law. Well, they're no longer virgins now. I don't know how they protect themselves. And I'd like to, and I know this will be delayed for a minute or two for your audience here, but when I'm speaking, the main question I have is it took 2 years of investigation, and the NCAA enforcement never, ever knew this was going on. Talking about head in the sand? My God. I can't believe they're either that naive, that slow, or they, in my opinion, they don't know what's happening in the world they run.
Well, let's follow up on that for a minute, because I think that's really important. This is not a wake-up call. This is fundamentally different. As you said, indictments are a different kettle of fish. How far does this go? Does it reach the head coaches and the programs beyond 4 assistant coaches? And what are the consequences of where it ultimately goes?
Okay, I can't forecast. I'll just deal with what we know as of today. There are certain groups that are under investigation or maybe indicted today, tomorrow, whatever. What I understand with no knowledge other than, someone giving me information, that there will be more people under this particular case. But we do know Some have already been indicted. Some have already been let loose. So that I can react to. And I can say that these people are in a hell of a lot tougher situation than any scandal that may evolve over all of this, all time, okay? We've had illicit scandals in the NCAA since point fixing in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. We had athletes running around masquerading as students since the 1920s and magnified in Minnesota in 1998 when the coach told them not to go, to this horrendous thing we're looking at now at North Carolina, which they don't know what the hell they're going to do. At this point, they haven't made a thing. We've had everything imaginable. But here's what we never had before: the federal government. I would believe, using my own common sense and watching this thing happen, I would believe that the low men on the totem pole, and I say that sometimes in order of wage or money earned or the conspiracy that they derived and who benefited the most, I would think this time, for the first time ever, there are some people who may be facing going to prison for a day, a year, whatever, but a day in jail's got to be hell. Okay, so it's different than not being able to coach for 9 games. It's different from being fired as an assistant coach. It's jail. This is what legally we all led to believe is happening. And by other people's logic and reasoning and my logic, I would assume there would be other people maybe involved, even if there isn't. What it did was not shine a black light on college basketball. It showed a spotlight on college athletics. Forget basketball. Why would this not happen other places? Well, the only other place I would say it could happen would be football. Because football, if you think basketball is good, if you take away the tournament, you're really, that is basketball, the NCAA tournament. I mean, the guys lose 99 games and they're still, playing for their app. But football, with the billions of dollars, now the basketball tournament gets, I think, $20 billion in the next contract they're going to get, okay? But football generates zillions of dollars every Saturday from all these 35 power, universities. Football is money off the wall that it's like a Christmas tree when it gets barren and brown. It starts dropping on the carpet and you got to get the sweeper up. That's money. Football is huge, and there are more people involved. You got players up to 95 on a roster. You got coaches into the 20s. I mean, you got specialists. And what else do you have? The money. The money is flowing. It's big.
So, Sonny, bottom line of all of this for our listeners, international and domestic, regardless of whether somebody goes to jail for a day, a year, and no matter who it is, do more athletes, student athletes, athletes generally get more revenue out of this as a result or not?
Well, if you're asking me, that's a great question, and thank you for interrupting me, and I mean that sincerely. What I pray happens out of this, and I think it would be a solution, not the complete solution, and it won't be the final solution, but a solution, that if they paid the athletes, if they gave them some sort of a stipend over and above that silly thing called, cost of attendance, okay, then you may eliminate a lot of the financial problems that athletes face going in, but also you may eliminate the temptation of some people taking money illicitly. That may happen. I'm not saying it will, because society and people are different, okay? You may be a billionaire and want to be a $2 billionaire. We understand that. Logic says that's true. But you have to allow the public to understand that these athletes do more than show up on Saturday afternoon or Friday night to play basketball games. You have to understand that we've now bargained them out in their own bodies to another network, and the network is the media. They are bargained out for no pay, nothing. They still go on the field. They still hit their heads against the wall. The basketball athletes pay for all the scholarships in the terms of the NCAA, the swimmers, the yachters, the fencers, and all well and good. But how can they be responsible for everybody's education? And the other thing is the bowl the committee to bowls, they don't even share the money with the universities and scholarships for other people. They're run by individuals. How can bowl promoters get millions of dollars? Now, to answer your question, if money doesn't trickle down to the athletes, I believe I'll finally see. I would love to see, and I hope it doesn't come, and that means there's change. The day when the athletes stand, instead of kneeling, instead of saluting, instead of doing anything, not showing up for class, if they ever not showed up for a ball game, and I'm not saying the kneeling was, I commend what they did. It's a different subject here, but I'm saying in order to raise attention to the plight of the athlete while they're in universities, if they don't show up to play in one of these bowl games, these Final Four games, or the NCAA finals, you will find all the partners of the NCAA cancel the contracts. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of the athlete. If they don't show up, it'll change in a minute because they have to pay the athletes then.
It is, by the way, an incredible perspective from Sonny Vaccaro, who nobody could argue has more history and more perspective and more understanding of this area, frankly, than anybody alive. Rick Horrow, sports professor, Beyond the Scoreboard. Be back in a minute.
We'd certainly like to thank Sonny Vaccaro for being so candid on this issue. Nobody knows where it's ultimately going to go, but the guys that run the Power 5 conference, and certainly those who are looking at the philosophical underpinnings surrounding college athletics, need to be really careful and need to take advice from those who call a spade and want to be front and center on meaningful reforms over time. If the NCAA doesn't do it, rest assured the criminal and civil courts will. That's our show for today, ladies and gentlemen. We'd love to thank Sonny Vaccaro and like to thank others for being involved in this. Tanner Simpkins for putting this together, along with Dan Martin and those at Comcast. Join us next week when we go Beyond the Scoreboard.